Once again, I welcome our President, Michael Gannon, to the podium for the next item of business, which is the role of Fellows. Michael.
Delegates, special guests, ladies and gentlemen, we now come to a special and immensely pleasurable part of the proceedings. We get the chance to formally recognise the outstanding contribution made by a select number of our colleagues. The AMA is one of the nation's most respected and influential voices in medicine and health policy, and this is due in no small part to the integrity, knowledge and judgment that leading AMA members have displayed when contributing to policy discussions and debates. Whether it be vaccination, hospital waiting lists, Indigenous health, aged care, obesity, e-health, e-cigarettes, medicinal cannabis or Medicare freezers, the AMA is turned to as a voice of reason. The 5 people being admitted to the role of Fellows today exemplify all that makes the AMA such a trusted and well-regarded contributor to national health policy and debates. It is wonderful that we have the opportunity today to show our appreciation for the outstanding contribution each has made. It gives me great pleasure, in alphabetical order, to admit the following people in 2018 to the AMA role of Fellows. Former AMA-ACT President, Dr Elizabeth Gallagher. AMA Northern Territory President, Associate Professor Robert Parker. Actually, you're going to just stand over there. Well, I just got told to come up. Okay, all right, just stand over there. The Chair of the AMA Federal Council, Associate Professor Beverly Rowbotham. Long-time AMA South Australia State Councillor, Dr Nigel Stewart. Dr Stewart's not with us today, but we will recognise him with a full citation. An immediate past President of AMA Queensland, Dr Chris Zapala. Dr Elizabeth Gallagher was born here in Canberra and completed her medical degree at the University of Newcastle. She trained in obstetrics and gynaecology at the John Hunter Hospital in Newcastle and at Maitland, Gosford and Canberra hospitals, as well as St Mary's Hospital in Portsmouth, England. Dr Gallagher has served as a council member of the Australian Menopause Society and as a member of the International Menopause Society, the Australasian Gynaecological Endoscopy Society, the Urogynecological Society of Australasia, and the Australian and New Zealand Vulvovaginal Society. Dr Gallagher has also given generously of her time as a member of the board of the John James Foundation and has devoted time each year for 8 years to work with Aboriginal communities in remote parts of Australia. She has also undertaken voluntary work in the Solomon Islands for the past 3 years. Dr Gallagher joined the AMA-ACT in 2000 and was appointed to the AMA-ACT Advisory Council as Obstetrics and Gynaecology Representative in 2010. She was elected AMA-ACT President in 2014, a time that coincided with the release of the 2014 federal budget and a number of critical local issues involving the ACT health system. In addition to representing AMA-ACT at National Conference from 2013 to 2017, Dr Gallagher was an AMA Federal Councillor from 2015 to 2017 and a member of the Medical Workforce Committee in the same period. At all times, she has shown remarkable leadership and her calm, measured and down-to-earth approach has consistently resulted in positive outcomes. Congratulations, Liz. Associate Professor Robert Parker. Rob didn't start his working career in medicine. Instead, he did a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Sydney and then spent 3 years working on the Tiwi Islands as the Aboriginal Arts and Craft Facilitator. That was where he was inspired by Dr Pat Rebgetz, an AMA member, to study medicine so he could make a difference to the health and well-being of Indigenous people. He graduated from the University of Newcastle in 1988 with a Bachelor of Medicine and was admitted as a Fellow of the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists in 1999. Rob joined the AMA in 1996 and has been an outstanding contributor to the association, both in the Territory and nationally. He was elected AMA NT President in 2014 and has been an effective negotiator with all sides of politics. As a result of his advocacy to the NT Alcohol and Policies Review, AMA NT secured a position on the newly formed NT Liquor Commission. He continues to lobby the Territory Government in support of changes to the legislation governing mandatory reporting of doctors to help achieve a national approach. Rob has been an active member of the Federal AMA since May 2014 as Territory nominee to the Federal Council, on the AMA Health Financing and Economics Committee and the AMA Task Force on Indigenous Health. He's also held numerous roles with the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists. Congratulations, Rob, very much deserved. Associate Professor Beverly Rowbotham. Well, what can I say about Bev? She has done an exemplary role, as ever, chairing our national conference. She has contributed to and led important changes in the activities of the medical profession and in the disability sector and for the AMA. Bev is a unique leader of the medical profession, combining her medical skills with her broad governance expertise across healthcare, commerce, government and the not-for-profit sector. She's also a former president of the Royal College of Pathologists of Australasia and has been elected 4 times to chair the AMA Federal Council, a post she has held since 2014. Bev is also a director of the largest specialist haematology diagnostic service in Australia and a director of Australia's largest medical indemnity insurer. An advocate for good governance, she has established the Bev Rowbotham Doctors on Boards Australian Institute of Company Directors scholarships, which are awarded to medical students at the University of Queensland. She is a member of several federal government peak bodies, including the National Pathology Accreditation Advisory Council, the Medicare Benefit Schedule MBS Review Task Force, and the Medical Services Advisory Committee. Bev is also the mother of a young man with a disability, and she has spent 15 years serving on the boards of organisations that provide education and disability services to children. Congratulations, Bev, richly deserved. Dr. Nigel Stewart. Born and educated in New Zealand, Dr. Nigel Stewart has lived in Port Augusta, South Australia for more than 20 years, where he works as a regional paediatrician at the Port Augusta Hospital. He's been an AMA member for 23 years and has been a member of the AMA SA Council over a 15-year period. Nigel has a passionate commitment to rural and regional health services, and in particular working towards an appropriate and supported workforce to care for the health of rural and regional communities. Nigel has brought his considerable expertise and insight to AMA state and federal advocacy. In 2006, he was awarded an AMA SA award for outstanding contribution to the medical profession. And in 2008, he won the Federal AMA Excellence in Healthcare Award. Nigel has made substantial contributions to AMA SA policy and AMA policy more broadly. He's been a knowledgeable and active contributor to AMA SA Council meetings that have informed South Australia's advice and engagement with federal AMA activities. He has a strong belief in the purpose and value of the AMA and invests significant time and passion into that belief through the support he provides. Nigel's not with us here today, but please put your hands together for Dr. Nigel Stewart. Dr. Chris Zapala. Chris is a renowned sleep specialist, which has no doubt helped him to get through his many meetings during his long AMA career. Chris is a past president of AMA Queensland, and he is widely respected as a tenacious, trusted and caring advocate for his professional colleagues and their patients. Chris graduated with first-class honours from the University of Queensland in 1997. He has managed a full-time clinical role, further education and AMA commitments throughout his medical career. His involvement with the Federal AMA began in 2004, back with me, as a member of the AMA Doctors in Training Committee. He's also served on the Medical Workforce Committee, the Council of Private Specialist Practice and Federal Council. As AMAQ President, Chris worked tirelessly to promote AMA campaigns and initiatives at both state and federal level. He is a staunch advocate for strong medical leadership at all levels of the health system. Through his current commitments on the AMA Federal Council, as well as the AMAQ Council, the Finance, Risk and Audit Committee, Governance Committee, Ethics and Medical Legal Committee and Policy Committee, Chris continues to improve the viability, functionality and governance of the AMA. Congratulations, Chris. Thank you all. The full citations of all our new fellows can be studied in the conference handbook. I would now like to invite Associate Professor Rowbotham to speak on behalf of all 5 inductees.
Thanks very much, Michael. So it doesn't matter what highways and byways we've taken in our professional lives, we are doctors first. This is our tribe, and the Australian Medical Association is the natural home of the tribe. And it's been a privilege to play our different roles in defending the tribe and advancing its cause, meaningful careers for doctors and better lives for our patients. It's a great honour to be acknowledged by our fellow members of the AMA. We thank you for it and accept our admission to the role of fellows with pride. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
I have to recall the fact that being awarded a fellowship of the AMA is one of the most amazing awards I've ever received, and only surpassed by the fact you elected me as president. But I can assure you that our new fellows feel very proud, and congratulations to all of them. One other observation I might make is that whenever it comes to award new fellowships, you're amazed that some of these people haven't been recognised earlier. But 5 very worthy and fabulous recipients. So thank you to Bev for speaking on behalf of the 5 new fellows, and congratulations to all of them. Next up is our session with past presidents on a better health system for doctors and all Australians, how AMA leadership drives health and social policy reform. A woman again of many talents. It's time for Bev to resume her place as the chair to take control of proceedings. Oh, God.
Well, thanks, Michael. And this session promises to be the highlight of this year's National Conference. We're absolutely delighted to have past presidents with us, and we're very much looking forward to what they've got to say to us as they've survived, recovering presidents. I think I'm introducing a video. Are we ready for that? No video?
In my think the AHA are bleating very loudly, but if they have concerns, and they're valid concerns, we're very happy to work with them.
Medicare is supposed to be the universal health insurer for all Australians.
A lot of GPs are going to be putting notices up saying their practice will be closed until further notice. We call upon all governments in this country basically to ban smoking from all public places, full stop.
If they're needing to raise money, you can do a fun run. Fun runs in our school, for instance, raise more money than a chocolate drive. We can do something about prevention. We can improve tobacco control with very little effort and very good results.
No improvement, Koshi, apart from a marginal one, perhaps an elective surgery in one area, but no, I'm afraid it's all shame. Really no improvement.
And the problem has been that one arm of government has blamed the other arm of government. The AMA has called for a single funder of the hospital system. Unfortunately, I never learned of an operation where I could surgically excise bureaucrats from the health system.
Good dose of chemo might do that.
Well, we don't want it to be a terminal illness.
And when 18-year-olds are thinking about taking that drink, they need to be aware that young brains are more susceptible to alcohol. Nobody's going to consume 2 cups of strong coffee very quickly, but most of these energy drinks have got at least that, sometimes 3 times that amount.
Yeah, that was fun. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what should be an entertaining and educational afternoon session. It may have a long title, A Better Health System for Doctors and All Australians, How AMA Leadership Drives Health and Social Policy Reform. I didn't write that. But it deserves to, given the collective corporate knowledge of the people who will welcome to the stage in a moment. Many in the AMA, and I'm one of them, have been puzzled why our association doesn't make greater use of our former presidents once their term has expired. It seems that everything comes to a sudden end and then they are gone. I may soon suffer the same fate. So it's not out of self-interest, but I think we do need to do more to mine the minds and exploit the experience of our former leaders. Most people who I explain to the fact that I'm going to the airport on Sunday afternoon and that's it are quite surprised. But governments want these people for committees and councils and commissions and reviews. Some of them are even invited to be political candidates. The health insurers want them, their colleges want them, pharmaceutical companies want them. Well, today we've got them, 6 of them anyway. We deliberately chose to invite those available to provide us with a snapshot of the last 20 years or so of AMA advocacy, and I'm delighted that the vast majority of people who we invited are able to join us today. We can and must learn from the successes of our past, and that's exactly what we're going to do this afternoon. I'm going to introduce the presidents one by one, but perhaps if you could all welcome them with applause, and if you could come and join me on the stage. Wow. Wow. Professor Kerryn Phelps AM was president from 2000 to 2003. Kerryn, of course, was the first female president of the Federal AMA, a true pioneer in this organisation and in many other roles. Among many highlights, Keren's 3-year term featured the Relative Value Study, the RVS, remember that, the Medical Indemnity Crisis and Resolution, a public stoush with Alan Fells and the ACCC over the Draconian Trade Practices Act, and an even more public stoush with the Health Minister, Dr Michael Wooldridge, over all sorts of acts. Keren and the AMA won both stoushes. Keren's leadership introduced an AMA position on complementary medicines, conducted a national drug summit, and sowed the seeds for the AMA's current strong stances on gender equity and marriage equality. Dr Bill Glasson AO, President from 2003 to 2005, better known as Wild Bill, took over from Keren and worked with the Howard government in close partnership with Tony Abbott to deliver the Medical Indemnity Rescue Package just before Christmas in 2004. Under Bill's watch, the government also delivered important reforms, such as increasing the GP patient rebate from 85% to 100% of the MBS schedule. There was the Medicare safety net, protecting the PBS from changes in the US Free Trade Agreement, the morning after pill brouhaha, and great advances in veterans' health and medical workforce. Bill's credo was IQAC, IQAAC, independence, quality, access, affordability and choice. A credo as relevant today as it was then. Dr Mukesh Haikwal AC was President from 2005 to 2007, and he was, above all else, a champion for GPs and their patients by winning new chronic disease items, improved access for rebates for allied health and dental care, and subsidies to employ practice nurses. Mukesh led important programs on informed financial consent, national registration, RU486, authority prescriptions, role substitution, and buried Joe Hockey smart card. Mukesh was a tireless campaigner against fund holding, both in Australia and in the land of the long white cloud. Mukesh went on to become chair of the World Medical Association in a decorated international career. Then out of the West emerged Associate Professor Rosanna Capilingua to serve as president. Only our second female president from 2007 to 2009. Rosanna faced many challenges, including steering health reform in the right direction for doctors and patients as Australia faced a change of government for the first time in more than a decade. The radical reform agenda of the Kevin 07 era needed to be guided in the right direction, and Rosanna was a prominent voice in government circles and with the National Health and Hospitals Reform Commission. Rosanna put the focus on hospital beds and hospital capacity, ensured that COAG's national accreditation reforms did not harm doctors and patients, put the spotlight on the not-so-super GP superclinics, and led the charge to combat swine flu. Never short of a feisty phrase, Rosanna put a hose on the light on the hill and condemned kumbaya medicine. My fellow obstetrician and gynaecologist, Dr Andrew Pesha, was your president from 2009 to 2011. Andrew was on the surface always calm and gentle and considered and keen to engage, but he played hard, as evidenced by his integral backroom work on medical indemnity some years before. Medical indemnity was, is and will always be a passion for Andrew, along with the NDIS and the NIIS. Nobody knows more about run-offs and tails than Andrew Pesha. Andrew's leadership delivered new coordinated care agreements with the Midwives and Nurse Practitioners Bill. He steered AMA advocacy on Medicare locals and local hospital networks to ensure doctor leadership, and won significant new funding for public hospitals. Andrew also established an advisory task force to examine ways to build AMA membership across all sectors of the profession. Andrew was also vocal on climate change and health and became expert on ground level ozone. Our final golden oldie, toady, is Dr Steve Hambleton, President from 2011 and 2014. Another 3-term president. He was that good. Steve was at the helm as the AMA celebrated its 50th anniversary. He also had to deal with the changing political environment as Labor lost its strong majority to hang on to power in minority government. This gave Steve the power to increase AMA influence over key health policies such as Medicare locals, local hospital networks and the patient-controlled electronic health record. Steve led the AMA's charge to ensure the professional services review processes stayed on track and started the ball rolling on improving doctors' health services. Steve was big on public health, leading the attack on energy drinks, on junk food ads and obesity. Steve was even bigger on role substitution. He railed against podiatrists creeping gradually up the leg, chiropractors making clicky noises with babies' backs, made apples sexy for better diets, and exposed Coke and fries pharmacy. And he scrapped the cap on work-related self-education expenses. He was indeed Rambo Hambo. Ladies and gentlemen, please again make these 6 giants of the AMA welcome.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now hear from the experts about political advocacy. Let's start with you, Karen. What stands out most in your time as President?
I think the thing that stands out most during my presidency was that the profession was facing a real crisis of survival, really, and that was the medical indemnity crisis. When I was in New South Wales AMA President just the year before I became Federal President, it became very apparent that several of our specialties were under real threat, in particular obstetrics, neurosurgery and plastic surgery, and that we were facing a possible drain of those subspecialties over to United States, Europe and the UK. And so we had to do something about it. And so when I became Federal AMA President, we had a sweet spot in the political cycle where we had 8 Labor state and territory governments and a Liberal federal government. So we were actually able to organise some harmony around the state and federal governments, and it took some doing, but we actually got the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet to take the lead on working with the medical profession to find a solution to back up the medical indemnity companies who were going to be struggling with what was called IBNRs, or the claims that had been that had happened, bad things that had happened that weren't yet reported and hadn't been covered in the indemnity claims. So while it sort of sounds a little technical at the moment, we had to make that issue something that the public cared about. And the threat of losing obstetrics and neurosurgery were things that the public actually started to think, hang on a second, we really have to do something about this. And ultimately, John Howard took a personal interest and made sure that all of the departments that were relevant to the issue were engaged in the process, and we got the state and federal governments all working together, and with the AMA taking the lead. So I suppose that is the issue that sticks out the most. The medical workforce was another one that was very prominent in my time, and we very soon after I became AMA President, we realised that the government was actually working from the wrong data set, and they were saying that there was an oversupply of GPs, where anecdotally on the ground we knew there was an undersupply. And so I discussed this with my colleagues and with our AMA staff, and we decided that we would get our own data set. And so, being an evidence-based profession, the first thing we needed to do was to get our own evidence. And so we got Access Economics to conduct the biggest ever study of its kind. 20,000 doctors were asked what their views were, what their plans were, how many hours they were working, and we got a real data set. And that really transformed the AMA's, the way the government deals with the medical workforce. And of course we had a very large social policy agenda as well, which included the first ever Indigenous report card, and the first time that the medical profession developed a policy position statement on climate change and human health.
All right, Bill, we'll go in order. Your reflections on your time in the job.
Well, obviously, I had big shoes to fill in following on from Karen, and I certainly didn't think I was going to win the AMA presidency, I'll be honest with you. I came as the outsider, and I was only driven because, like Karen, had been the state president in Queensland. I could see what was happening to especially particularly in obstetrics and neurosurgery. I could see these great doctors who committed their life to their profession, to their patients, in tears, and this is what's happening. These people are in tears as their profession was being destroyed, as they're being sued day in, day out by these bloody out-of-control lawyers who were just having a field day. And so I normally don't do anything unless I get angry, and so I got really pissed off. And I said to my wife, I can't sit around here with this happening, let's get stuck into these buggers. Anyway, so I put my hand up, and a lot of support from around this table here. I got up, and as Karen was just saying, I remember just a lot long on the job, they said, the doctors are a bit like a big polar bear, you know, they lie there and you give them a kick and they lie there, give them a kick, lie there. But I said that when they finally wake up, look out. And so we had our rally at New South Wales, which the New South Wales AMA largely organised with Laurie Pincott and his team. Now, I need to acknowledge all the CEOs, by the way, we had in those times. And I went there thinking there'd be 100 doctors in bloody Randwick. Well, there were 4,000 of them there on a Sunday. And I thought to myself, this is what we need. This is what we need. Finished the meeting within, must have been 1 minute. John Howard called and said, Bill, I think we've got a problem. Yes, Prime Minister, I think we have a real problem. It's not a problem about doctors, it's a problem about your constituents, your constituents, our patients. And so don't think this is about doctors. You won't have a doctor left if you continue to go down this line. So within 24 hours more so, the then Minister Kay Patterson was gone and Tony Abbott took over as the Health Minister. What do you say about Tony Abbott? I can tell you what. And at the time with Julia Gillard too, by the way, those two people we worked with really closely, and they worked side by side. And I have to acknowledge my colleague to the right, Andrew Pesha, was just extraordinary. I put him in charge of the Medical Indemnity Committee, and with Mukesh, my great 2IC here, Rosanna, Dana, Chung Su, Alan Zimmer, that team we had at the time, took it forward. And the meetings consist of Tony Abbott writing the legislation with Andrew and others around the table. And so it really was a grassroots sort of response. And so from that, without talking too long, I suppose medical indemnity dominated my 2 years, led by Karen and her charge. But I did tear out my first 3 pages of my final speech to see what else I did. And my God, we did a lot else as well, but I won't go into that. But by way of introduction, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Bill. Mukesh, insights from your time in the job.
It was in between elections, and so it was a little bit quieter, I thought. But we continued to have the same sorts of problems. We were finishing off the work that obviously started in Karen's time and Bill's time with the indemnity, because there was always loose ends, and Andrew again was very much part of the whole process. We had a great executive, and that's the key thing. We had good people, good team, good executive, good council. You know, we actually...
Next one.
So I was saying that, you know, the key...
Hang on, are you turned on?
Can you hear me now? No? Thank you.
Old school.
So
Plan B.
We thought we were in a relatively quiet time between elections, but it wasn't quite as quiet as we might have hoped. And as usual, policy had to be mopped up from the work of Karen and Bill around indemnity. Andrew was doing a lot of that work. We had a very good, strong executive, an excellent federal council, which actually worked extraordinarily well together. And you know, people talk about the 34-member board, but when you've gone through a Saturday talking to 33 people, you've got a pretty good idea of what you need to say and how you're going to do that. And so to me, that whole teamwork, reaching out, the outreach to the states, going regional, rural, remote, getting to see the people and seeing what the pain people are facing in their own home ground, which you'll have seen as well, makes a huge difference to focus the mind on what you're doing and why you're doing it. So the things that were said in the video and the things that you introduced us with were very much part of that. It was about being brave. So I met Paul Bowert on the way in yesterday, and he reminded me of one thing. I thought, how am I ever going to run with this one when the AMA has no confidence in the government of the Northern Territory ability to look after its people, in particular Aboriginal people? But we did. And we got, I would say, I was at the Gold Coast auditorium, and by the time I got to the airport, which isn't very far on the Gold Coast, I had every single politician on the Northern Territory ringing me, demanding a meeting. And we went up to Darwin, and I then had to fly down to Alice Springs sitting behind Claire Martin, the Chief Minister, and I think she tried to drop my roll-on onto my head. She didn't look at that. So, but it's about being brave. I mean, there's some difficult calls we had to make. We actually had to work very hard not to get new legislation around private insurance. That's where we sprung up with the idea of let's talk about fees. So it's a whole lot of things. It's really hard to pick any particular ones. But actually, as you say, it's a buzz. In fact, it was David Brand who said to me as we took over, you know, strap on your belt, hold on to your hat and just go. And that's actually absolutely what we did. And it was possible with the great team around us and the great team in the offices, state and federal offices. They were just incredible. That's the AMA, that's the story of the AMA. That's why we do so well, because we have such great people around us and allowing us to do what we do.
Mm-hmm. Rosanna, your reflections.
Well, I support completely everything that's been said already around the great team of people that are behind you and beside you, providing you with the information, the absolute current response that you need to be ahead and abreast of the issues and to be able to take the public with you, to be able to communicate so clearly. You know, the AMA has a very credible brand in the public eye. It is up to the state AMA and state presidents and the federal AMA presidents to keep that credibility. It's membership numbers and penetration, sure, but if you have the patients and the people with you, then you have credibility with government, you have the creds. So that ability to communicate and bring people with you is incredibly important. So in my time, as Michael described, we'd had a Howard government in for 10 years or so. It was the Kevin 07 election. I started with the Howard government in. I started without a Secretary-General. I think you had a similar experience, Steve, did you not? For a while, and that's a tough gig. So I thank Secretary-Generals who are able to stay the distance, and presidents who have great Secretary-Generals always do very well. There's no doubt about that. And we had at that time the national registration debate. Everyone's familiar with the organisation we have now, AHPRA, of course. Well, that was the day when we thought national registration should have been like a driver's licence model. It was about the mobility of doctors across states to be able to work freely and appropriately registered at a national level. But the government's idea, or I'd say the bureaucrats' idea, was to put in a much more complex, complicated, multi-profession system, a huge bureaucracy that cost a lot of money, and we experience that now on a day-to-day basis. And I guess still the most crucial issue around that, apart from the executing of vexatious complaints and really the persecution of doctors along the way, is that in only one state, Western Australia, do we have protection for the doctor-patient relationship when the patient is a doctor. In other words, the mandated reporting under that legislation still exists everywhere else. So at that time, Howard actually, again, he's been mentioned a few times now, understood, and we got from him a commitment that the system going forward, if he was re-elected, would not be the model that had been put up, that would be a more simplified model that would provide the doctors with what they needed, but didn't interfere with the medical board's effectiveness at a state level. Change in government, time passes, we've got the system that we've got, and now I think you find the medical boards are the servants of that national registration body. So that was one of the big things, and if you could say I told you so, I'm sure all of the presidents around this table can look at what's happened and go, I could have told you that was going to happen. The bed numbers, the Indigenous report card, the public hospital report cards that we do, they are incredibly valuable benchmarks that, you know, government listens to. In my time, we actually measured the numbers of beds that we were short in Australia, and it was 4,000 plus beds. It's probably still the same, I would suggest. Everyone was pushing for the no need for beds, and we know we only need beds when we need beds, and utopia would be if they were not necessary at all. But until we get this population as fit and lean, and everyone practicing the preventative health that we want them to, and public health and preventative health as an AMA front is also incredibly important, keeping the population healthy as well as advocating for the proper funding to look after the people when they're in need. And I think all of us have done that.
Andrew, would you like to reflect on your time as President?
So, I also was between elections because I came on board just when the Labor government had won a sweeping victory, and you know, people were predicting they were going to be in there for 3 terms, unassailable, which of course didn't turn out to be, but it was a very intimidating position. and had a very strong reformist agenda, and you sort of say, well, how do you respond to this? How do you represent your members? But how do you also reflect on what you think is right for the health system? It was a challenge, and I guess I always used to go back to saying, well, I guess if I'm here, I've always had the most tremendous respect for the medical profession. I say, well, what would good doctors want their president to be saying? And I guess I'll just give one anecdote. Sort of not long after I came into one of my first visits to office as president, and the health minister Nicola Roxon had just announced legislation to extend MBS and PBS benefits for nurses and midwives. And I sort of walked through, and I got this press release handed to me saying, Roxon's just announced this, we're going to put this out. And it was, I guess, at that stage, probably the position that always would have been, we're going to oppose this. We're going to oppose this. But, it would have exhausted a lot of political capital to oppose it, and we probably wouldn't have succeeded in opposing it. As I said, we had a government that was completely sort of in the ascendancy. And I thought, well, what would my colleagues, what would their concerns about this be? I don't think they're concerned about nurses or midwives getting some medical benefits schedule payments. It's that all of a sudden they can just go off and just see patients and get funding for that, and then we'd have another split in the health system, another fragmented bit of care where people might go off. And so instead of opposing it, I guess our principle was to bring the minister around to understanding that risk, and saying we will support this as long as we can prevent fragmentation of the health system. And so they say, well, how would you do that? So, and of course that's the thing, you don't give them a problem, you come with them a solution. And that's when we came up with the collaborative arrangements, so that we would support the use for the first time of funding which had previously been only the province of doctors, to be given to nurses and midwives as long as they had an agreement with the patient's usual doctor, the GP, or in the case of midwives, with an obstetrician who was going to have to back them up if they came in and had a problem with their patient and needed that. And in a sense, that puts some disciplines around it instead of it going out as it has in some other countries where it's had a lot of unintended consequences. I guess I thought I must have got it right, because I got hammered by the midwives and nurses on one hand for blocking this important reform, and I got hammered by some of the colleagues who thought we really had been stronger. But I think in the end the balance was about right. I think there hasn't been a wholesale emission of fragmented bits of care. There were going to be nurses in pharmacies looking after patients instead of the GP. That hasn't happened. I think that it's still... I don't think anyone argues with the principle. And I guess to try and just put my summary of it, instead of just saying no, we said, look, we can work with this as long as you listen to us and address our reasonable concerns. And I think that's probably what I remember best about what we were able to achieve.
All right, and finally, the most recent of the past presidents on the stage, Steve Hambleton.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you again, colleagues. It's interesting, I hear my past presidents talking about stability in government, and I think I must have been president when there were 4 prime ministers, 3 health ministers, 1 prime minister twice, and in fact 2 secretary generals, and 8 months without a secretary general when I was president, which was amazingly challenging. But I've got to say that those staff that we have at the Federal AMA lifted their game, and we actually had an amazing outcome, because we actually fought an election without a Secretary General, which was extraordinary. So I do thank them, and I recognise them supporting me at that time. It was a great theme, though, that Andrew had left us with in dealing with government, to say, look, if we do disagree with something, you really got to come to them with a better plan. And I think that sort of set me in good stead, because we worked together very carefully over the independent nurse practitioner risk. And Andrew was amazing when I went to meetings with him. In fact, you know, the first 2 hours of every meeting, they'd be at loggerheads and they'd be uncomfortable, and then we start to get down to tin tacks and start to work through some issues. And by the end of the meeting, there was a fairly clear direction that we needed to go through. So we tackled a whole bunch of things. I mean, I think what I tried to do was be the voice of reason. We do have a very high media profile, and I deliberately tried to continue that to make sure that the AMA voice was heard. And I have to apologise to our current president for those early morning phone calls, because that's what was happening in my time. They do want to know what the, not just in mine, they want to know what the AMA thinks about something. And, you know, the soft media got our voice out there. It meant that government knew who we were, the lobbyists knew who we were, and when there was something serious, they came to us, which was really important. But fragmentation of care was a theme that kept up. You know, we had, you heard earlier in the introduction, we had pharmacy wanting to vaccinate between the toothpaste and the toilet paper without any reference to the GP. We had podiatrists wanting to do more work. We had optometrists wanting to prescribe glaucoma medication without a collaborative arrangement with ophthalmologists. There was all sorts of extensions and threats to that collaborative primary healthcare model that we proposed and we prosecuted. It wasn't just medical issues, though, that we have a role in, and I know that we were challenged today by the politicians, in particular Senator Di Natale, to come, if we have a view that we should prosecute that view. Scrap the Cap was one of those that was a huge impact, not just on our medical profession. They were going to put a cap on self-education expenses of $2,000 per individual. And the AMA was one of the, well, started that campaign, developed the Scrap the Cap name, and got together a coalition of interested groups. Something like 60 or 70 different groups in at least 1.5 million to 2 million people that we gathered the views of, including the university sector, to say to the government this was not a good plan, it should not happen. So many times you're surprised by a budget outcome and you can't believe that people can do it, and you need to stand up and fight against it. So we developed that coalition, we worked very well with our partners, and we were able to deliver that. And I guess, as you say, I did look back on the final speech, and it was a bit like what we heard today. There are so many issues that your president touches on, and we want you to be out there and to prosecute our view. And I acknowledge all of my colleagues that went before and come after, and whoever gets up on Sunday morning, we're here to help you, and we're only a phone call away.
Well, thank you everyone for that introduction. So, Steve, you've just made reference there to the challenge from Senator Dr. Di Natale today on climate change. Should the I'm happy to take answers from anyone. I mean, should the AMA come out and say that the Adani coal mine shouldn't go ahead, or should it focus on the health impacts of climate change? I'm opening up the floor to anyone. Anyone want to dive in? Don't all speak at once. Karen.
I'll dive in. I think we need to be able to make a connection between an issue and a health outcome in order for the AMA to rightfully be able to take a stand. And we saw that last year with the marriage equality debate, where there were very clear health outcomes from the discrimination. And if you're talking about something like the Adani mine, I think that we have to get evidence. We're an evidence-based profession, and we need evidence of the outcome being bad for the health of humans, because that's what we're dealing with. And that was one of the reasons why, when I was AMA president back in, I think it was about 2002, we gathered together a whole range of environmental groups and environmental health groups to develop the climate change and human health policy, because that, I felt at the time, could form a platform to go forward, to be able, for the AMA to be able to have a voice in environmental issues. So yes, where there is a demonstrable human health outcome, I think the AMA absolutely should be there. And I do think that one of the strengths of the AMA is that we aren't just a self-interested group, that we actually have a parallel public policy agenda, which is all about what is in the interests of our patients, but the community at large.
I think that I absolutely agree with that. And sometimes the Adani is a great one because it's well publicised. And so we are a political group, but we're not a party political group. And so we have to be very careful about going for the health issues. And the same way as Karen started the work, we put out a paper around increasing temperatures down to Sydney and dengue coming into the country and all that sort of stuff, which was well researched and showed real connection. And so yes, it is important that we do that. Our World Medical Association that we're part of has great policy around that stuff as well, because there are significant health impacts if we don't handle that part. So sometimes it's not tasteful to do that. It seems like you're taking a political view because it has become quite polarised out there. But actually, we talk about the health issues, then we're on very steady ground.
We came out against coal seam gas, and I think we took the view that the precautionary principles should apply as well. Where you don't have the data, we should be cautious. And I think in terms of climate change, and we know there are health effects, and we did make that very clear. The decisions that politicians make, they need to actually project forward what's the impact, because we are going to see health impacts. Those sort of things we do need to highlight.
But Michael's question has another question behind it, and I think it's, as doctors, we're very comfortable with medical evidence, and we'll talk about medicine. But when we go out there, then of course, as many members of the AMA, there can be a whole lot of diversity of opinion. And I guess one of the issues, and I've seen it, and during my presidency, there were examples, and in others, that if I was just to be a bit provocative, the AMA doesn't really have a process whereby we can consult with our membership to get them the feeling that they're contributing to whatever the statements we're going to make. Now, I'm not saying there's an easy answer to this, but it's very easy for us to sit around the executive and say, this is what we're going to say, and forget that maybe there are members out there who feel that their view isn't being respected or reflected adequately in the way that the message is given. So that's the only thing that I'd add to that discussion.
So I think, a couple of the issues that national medical associations around the world find very difficult and very divisive are euthanasia and abortion. It is very difficult to take a whole diverse membership with you on those kind of issues. We're about to revisit our statement on conscientious objection, and that may be a real challenge for the AMA. Deliberately I have, I've left a few bombs behind for my successor, but the issue of effective referral is going to be very difficult, because I think that there might be I suspect there's a majority view that effective referral is appropriate for abortion, certainly not held by everyone, and I think there would be a view that effective referral for euthanasia is a lot more challenging. How are we going to deal with that potentially divisive issue in the years, in the months and years going forward?
Sorry, ladies.
I was just going to say, there is an example. Thank you. I'll use that prerogative, shall I? Yeah.
Please.
Ladies first. You've given an example in your presidency where you actually went out to the membership around the euthanasia debate and polled the membership and had a very good evaluation of that response, which as a state person as well as a federal AMA member, certainly West Australia very much appreciated that leadership and the work that was done. So it can be done. I think you're right, particularly now the voice wants to be heard more loudly. I think we've gone away a little bit from the times when doctors used to just sit in their offices and beaver away seeing patients and let someone else make the decisions. The younger generations want to be heard, they want to have a voice, they want to be engaged in the discussion. So we need to be able to go out and hear and integrate. At the same time, I think it's also very fraught with risk if we don't enter into discussion or don't lead in some way. So carefully formulated, carefully thought out, integrated, the voice of our profession heard and the voice of the community heard, we do have to step up and lead. I have probably not answered your question, but you did give an example during your presidency where we did try and hear the voice.
Bill.
I'm just going to comment on certainly the death and dying one came up when I was the president. I thought our policy, AMA policy, I kept reading it because I thought it made so much sense, and it made me proud as a doctor to read that policy, which I clearly reflected what we should be doing as doctors, and that's allowing patients to die with dignity and die free of pain. It wasn't about voluntary euthanasia. That's a completely different debate. To me, that's got nothing to do with us as doctors. That's the community has to make that debate. The community has to decide how they want to move forward with that issue. But in terms of a doctor, my role, our role, is to make sure those patients are comfortable and that they die with dignity and die free of pain. So I think it's having the right policy that sits in behind that. When it comes to, obviously, abortion, I'll leave that to the obstetricians to sort out. But again, I think we should have a fairly clear policy of what our views are in terms of us as doctors, and then in terms of the rights of the woman and the rights of the child. Again, that needs to be reflected in that policy.
Look, and I think the way that the AMA tries to go about it, and I do appreciate that we did go to the membership to try to get some feedback for some direction in those policies which are very divergent in views. It's really important to engage members in that process, because when I was AMA Queensland president, we were dealing with the abortion issue in Queensland. And of course, if you go in one direction and you haven't consulted widely, you lose the membership. Doctors have a way of showing you they're unhappy by resigning. And I used to ring those people that resigned and said, you're unhappy with our policy, you need to not resign, you need to get 10 of your mates who agree with you and come and argue your case, and we'll shift our policy. But if the membership doesn't feel engaged in those very, very difficult debates, when you come out and say, I'm not prosecuting my view, I'm prosecuting the collective view of the AMA, and I really was full of admiration for the way you handled that euthanasia debate. And I think you did prosecute the collective view. And you acknowledged that we have members who are far over this side, members far over that side. We've consulted them both, but the collective view of the AMA is this. We have a policy, that's what you prosecuted, and that brings everybody in, even those who have divergent views, and it's fair for everyone. There will be debates like this for the new president, and then you do need to make sure we have a mechanism to collect those divergent views together so they all feel like they've been heard.
So I do want to acknowledge that when I said what I said, the way that the euthanasia issue was handled, I thought was fantastic, and it's a great exemplar of how we should be doing it. And it was the first time it had been done. Well, I don't remember it being done before, and it was done quite well. It was something that we need to sort of think about, in that, how do we engage our membership in other decision making, and not just it being the exception, but maybe build it into a representational sort of structure.
Now, Karen, I'm not being provocative by asking you this question, and I want you to.
But I am.
Well, I am. I will be anyway.
No, I'm not being provocative at all. On this topic, and did we get it wrong on marriage equality? Now, hear me out. With euthanasia, I was chair of the ethics committee. I was accused by the people in charge of the process, including the president and the vice president, were accused that it was too slow. It was going over such a long period of time, but it was deliberately careful. The stages of going out to the membership, of going back and forward to the states and territories, of going to federal council twice, it was deliberately cautious and careful. Everyone knows how proud I am of that page and a half, but we got to a point and we had 0 resignations. I think we've had something it's less than 100, but we've had between 50 and 100 resignations on our stance on marriage equality. I'm not being provocative by asking you the question. Do you think we got the process wrong by that being, and for those in the audience who don't know, it was a federal council working group, and the working group reported to the federal council, who then voted on the position statement?
Michael, it only took 15 years. So the process may have been slow in some respects, but in terms of, you know, for example, like glaciers, it wasn't so slow.
Without being provocative.
Without being provocative. I think that the AMA had a very strong backup with the sexuality and gender diversity policy that came in under my presidency in 2002. And that really unequivocally said that there should be no discrimination for LGBTQI people under the law. And the Marriage Act is a law. And so really the policy's been sitting there since 2002. But to actually cross the line to the AMA supports marriage equality was an absolute game changer for the community. And the fact that it came at a time when community sentiment had shifted to, you know, very strong support, where the medical profession was unequivocally seeing, generally not everybody, but generally seeing marriage equality as a bona fide health issue. There would have been a death toll to a no vote, without any question, and there would have been a morbidity toll to a no vote. You know, I think the medical profession, led by the AMA, did absolutely the right thing by our profession and by the community in supporting marriage equality. I remember, I mean, David Brand is the other AMA president who's just here now, and several of us here on the stage today were at a rally in Parliament, in Martin Place in September last year. And we held that rally in support of marriage equality. It was attended by medical students, by junior doctors, members of the public, some of the local politicians were there, and it really just harnessed the momentum. And so I think the AMA, even though from my perspective, having a personal stake in the matter, obviously, and having sort of, I guess, started the marriage equality conversation in Australia and within the AMA, I knew I had to be patient. I didn't know quite how patient I would have to be, but as it turned out, everybody came to that point at the right time, and I think when the AMA gave it that push and said this is a health issue, it was really a quantum shift in community sentiment. So I'd have to say, I would like it to have been faster, but I think the process was right.
Mukesh, do you think we got the process right? Just again, deliberately comparing those two potentially very divisive issues, one of them that had a membership cost and the other, you know, potentially even more contentious didn't. Any comments on the process? I mean, Keren's asserted that it was a 15-year process, so you can't say it was quick and rapid fire.
Look, I think there's to me, there's two parts to this. One is that the community thoughts about this have changed in those 15 years. So in terms of marriage equality, the momentum was definitely there, but by having a cohesive, cogent medical view was actually quite useful in that whole process, and I think that absolutely made a difference. In issues, and it usually relates to reproductive health and death, they often are very, very difficult to unpick. And, you know, you have to go very cautiously, and sometimes you have to use very different, you know, very clear words, because that makes the difference. You know, if something is actually legal, then, for instance, I mean, Andrew and I presented at the Senate hearing with all the senators on the first day of hearings about RE486. You know, that was, I don't know, it was 2.5 hours, and then I said, look, I've got to go out to a flight. I can't, sorry guys, we'll get you back, because I look forward to it, not. But it's important that, you know, we had some very good policy around it that steered a very clear way about there is some evidence for this being safer if you're allowing it anyway, and that currently allows abortion, so that makes it the way you do it. Now, I know that there's a debate that people don't believe that that's as a policy. In terms of the euthanasia, I mean, this has been something that's gone through, you know, Trevor Mudge did it with his vice president. He did a big symposium in Sydney, and Nishki came to that one. And so this has always been part of our, what do we do? World Medical Association, when we do that, it's international. The abortion debate's coming back through those fora as well. I think that ultimately we are playing to what the norms are in the community. We have to do some leadership, of course, as to what isn't possible. but ultimately we have to go with what our members are asking us for. So as we have more ability to get feedback more rapidly, as you managed to do with the recent survey that you did on euthanasia, it becomes more possible. It wasn't so possible before. You had to respond relatively quickly and give some guidance to people as are in the Parliament trying to make decisions. And I think that we are, as time has progressed, it's become easier, but it's always hard to make those difficult decisions.
Michael, sometimes you've got the luxury of time to develop policy. You might have a year to put together a team of experts and to come up with all of the evidence on something like climate change and human health. But you would know from your last few years as AMA President, and congratulations on your term as well. You've done an absolutely brilliant job. I've been proud to watch you represent our profession during your term. But you know that sometimes you'll get the call and or you're in the middle of a doorstop and you get asked a question out of left field, and you've just got to go with your instincts and go with what you believe that your colleagues would want you to say at that time.
And a point I'd really like to make here, and we're talking about the presidents, but one of the great strengths of the AMA is the Secretariat and the fantastic quality of the people that we had working. And as Mukesh said, when they are able to help you, and of course it's always the doctors who make the decision, but the Secretariat craft it in a way that the policy is there. And as a few people have said today, the policy on abortion, the policy on euthanasia, all of that is very well structured, it's nuanced, it's very, very defensible, it's very, very good. So I want to say that if there's one of the great things about the AMA and why doctors should pay to be members of the AMA, it's because it pays for that Secretariat work that allows our association to have really well-developed policy instead of relying on us making ad-lib decisions sometimes on the run. You always look at the policy and it's there. So I would like to pay tribute to our Secretariat and the people who work to really work up that policy.
And on the back of that also, let's put hands up. On the back of that also, Andrew, the person, I suppose, thinking back to my presidency, who were the people? It's a team effort, but my state CEOs, particularly during the endemic crisis, were extraordinary. From Gallagher in the north, Paul in the west, Laurie, Robin south. Just great people who just got behind the federal aim on that issue. But at the end of the day, who was the person who, when you got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or who was trying to draft your thoughts, was Flannery. Now, I wouldn't have survived without Flannery. And if even these days I could make some press statement or something on some other issue, I still ring up Flannery and say, listen, what should I say, or how should I say it? So I really want to acknowledge, not only the Secretariat, I agree with Andrew and the team, they have been extraordinary, and to our Secretary General, we as presidents are mute without them. But at the end of the day, to get our message out there, get our message tight, particularly determining on who we're speaking to in terms of the visual media as opposed to the written media, to get that message tight, Flanders always can put it in a way that I call it burley, so burley in the water. They always bite if Flanders has had his way with the words. So here's to Flanders as well.
I think that Karen's giggling because she brought him into the fold. And I was wondering, who's that bloke that's always behind Karen? We soon found out, didn't we?
Well, Steve, both you and Rosanna have made reference to the fact that you coped without a Secretary-General. So I'll ask with a two-part question. You did it so masterfully. Do we actually need a Secretary-General?
Oh.
That was the appropriate response.
Or a General Secretary.
And what advice do you have for the new Secretary-General who takes over in the next 2 months? And one other part to the question, when you were effectively acting as Secretary-General, did the state and territory CEOs, if only briefly, behave?
Well, in fact, I had enormous support from the states when I was federal president, and I actually acknowledge all of the state leadership for that, and all of the state presidents. Talking about changing our policies, we've been trying to do governance reform in the AMA for 20 years. All of us probably tried to think about national governance reform, decreasing the size of the board, getting a more modern organisation. We simply could not have done that without the help of the states. And I remember just before one federal council, getting to the point where I just didn't know whether we were going to get through or not. And it was actually some of the most junior, in terms of age, state presidents. I think it was Richard Chung from WA, Alex Markwell from Queensland, and might have even been Brian Owler from New South Wales, said, no, we've got to do this. We've got to see this through. We've got to get it done. So I had extraordinary support, and I really thank them for that. So yes, it was quite a good time. Working without a Secretary-General was extraordinarily difficult because, in fact, it was wasn't so much, it was personally difficult because on a Monday morning I'd get on the 6:10 flight from Brisbane, fly to Canberra, and we'd have our meeting with the Secretariat on Monday morning, and I wouldn't go home till the Thursday. So it was an extraordinary chunk out of the week. And
tried doing it from the west.
Yeah, the impact on the family was extraordinary. My wife's sitting here listening at the moment, probably going, yes, it was, you definitely need a Secretary-General. Just to have that confidence that the place is coordinated, we kept the senior leadership team in the AMA stepped up, and we kept the place running beautifully. And I really thank them for that. We certainly, when you get a Secretary-General, you can step back a little bit, you can start to plan, you can start to improve. So we were holding the fort, and we were doing a good job, and I think externally people would hardly have known. But you can't do the next level. You can't actually start to do the restructuring, the planning, the sort of expertise you hire a Secretary-General for. My only advice for the incoming Secretary-General is to acknowledge the high quality of the staff that we've got now, draw from them the experience that you need to get on your feet. It is a tough job to learn. And you've been amazing. I've seen you. You're the first person that was in the office in the morning, and any night I wanted to call at 6 o'clock, you were still in the office. I think you were the last to leave. So that's an enormous contribution that you made, and I think we sort of expect our Secretary-Generals to be available. We've got to think about work-life balance, and I know my wife's going to go, you wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about. But we do need to make sure we can make it a job that can be done, and I think with good support it can. So there's good people around. I think if you listen initially, that's a good thing for the new Secretary-General.
So, Rosanna, you're returning to the board. For people who don't know, what are you expecting to achieve? What needs to be achieved? What do you think about the new structures? And I think I know your opinion on the loss of the executive. The presidency can be a very lonely place. You do have the vice president still to fall back on, but certainly I didn't have that extra 4 people to work on. So, just perhaps. We'll start with you, comments on that governance reform so the loss of the executive and the move to the board, your comments on that.
I actually reflected on that loss of the executive when Bill referred to us as a team back in his time, and certainly in all of our times I think the executive team supporting the President was very important and vital. So for those of you that don't know, there was the Vice President, the Treasurer back in the day when we had Treasurers, and a couple of others. So a total of Chair of Council and 2 others, so 6 altogether. Yep. And we met on a monthly basis and stayed in touch with each other very regularly across issues all the time. So as a President, you had people that you could instantly communicate with, discuss things with, thrash things out. Policy was being looked at by that collective head. And you're right, presidency is a lonely place anyway. A lot of time is spent in airport lounges and in hotel rooms on your own. So to have not had that, Michael, I hadn't reflected on it until now. I can imagine that means that your job was even more difficult, I should suggest, that you've done it extremely well. So I think that maybe we could think over time what other support the President could have around him in a collegiate way outside of the Federal Council, perhaps meetings. The governance changes, look, we have to be in a modern world, but we shouldn't do governance for the sake of governance and change for the sake of change. It is actually aimed for a better outcome overall. It's still fairly new, I think, in the AMA federally. I'm going to get briefed tomorrow by Anne. I'm looking forward to my briefing. I think my role here is to make sure that the AMA is sustained for those who come after us, and sustained in a way that it will provide our younger colleagues and those yet to graduate from medical school and a professional organisation that gives them some solid credibility and authority in the community to do what we need to do as a profession to look after our patients well. That is what my view always has been of the AMA, and you know, we may be exiting, but may it long continue to do the great work that it has done previously.
Andrew.
So I'd like to make a comment here, because I guess the people who've been around here for a while were for my presidency, and I think I'll be quite frank here that in my presidency there was it was a challenging time, as I described, and there was a real danger that you know, decisions that we made and maybe positions that I put forward might have got ahead of the organisation. And we didn't have monthly meetings; we had weekly meetings. Yeah. And you know, at the time it was, you know, it was challenging. But I think looking back on it now, I think it was the right thing. And I guess I'm bringing it up now that you don't need it when things are going well. When things are going well, anything works. But when there are tensions, when there is a tricky situation, when there are various opinions that need to be balanced and incorporated into policy, not only policy but public pronouncements of the President, the executive was a very, very good safety mechanism to ensure that it stayed okay. So, and I'm saying that in retrospect to people know who I'm talking about. I think it was the right thing, and I'm a bit cautious that if we end up in a similar sort of situation that we may lose that safety valve.
And just in terms of, I mean, I must say that I was very lucky when I took on the presidency. I had these two people to my right, particularly my old vice president, and I said to him, mate, I don't know anything about general practice. You go and handle the whole of that issue. So I really did not get involved with any general practice issues per se, personally. I saw myself as a conductor of the orchestra. I'm a great delegator. People say, how do you all think you want to do? I said, well, I just delegate. And so I delegated around to the team, and they'd basically do all the work and most of the talking. So, you know, general practice, Mukesh would take the interview, Mukesh would present our case. But as Rosanna's saying, it was really that executive. We did talk every probably 2 days, but we met face to face every month. And so I felt confident that what I was saying did reflect the views, hopefully, of the broader organisation by having these guys giving the input. So it is very much a team effort. Otherwise, it's very lonely otherwise.
I think one of the advantages of having a 30 or so member board is that I would just pick up the phone and talk to the person who I thought would have the most switched on view about a particular issue. So if it was an issue mainly around orthopaedics, I'd ring the orthopaedics representative, or if it was something around doctors in training, I'd ring the doctors in training representative. Of course, you know, John Flannery and I would have daily teleconferences about what the issues of the day were, what was happening in Canberra, what we might need to respond to. I had almost daily press conferences late morning or lunchtime, whether I was in Canberra, Sydney or wherever else we were. If there was an issue that had come up early, then we'd make sure that we, you know, either John would do a bit of a ring around, the CEO would, you know, give his input. I'd make a few phone calls if I needed to, and sometimes you just had to do that very quick assessment of the situation. So I never felt that I was in any way isolated, because I always felt that I had someone I could pick up the phone to and call them, and the responsiveness was extraordinarily good. So I guess we all have different styles of the way we do things, but I didn't ever feel as if I was out on a limb without somebody that I could call, except if I was in a press conference and I got asked a question out of left field that I hadn't been prepared for.
Andrew, I don't know what it is about us obstetricians. I don't know why we're so interested in medical indemnity, but we are, and it's an important issue. My question's not so much about indemnity, but one of the things I made reference to in my speech today is that I think I've been very fortunate to work with a health minister of Greg Hunt's intellect, but also having the wisdom to be able to listen to the AMA, to actually trust the advice. There are so many federal and state health ministers who are brought up not to trust it, to be suspicious of the advice. One of the things that I will attempt to claim credit for when I'm on a panel like this in 15 years' time is having a meal with Greg Hunt and I think fundamentally changing what the indemnity review was going to look like. It was put to me in the Federal Council meeting this week that membership's an issue. Sometimes it's worth setting the place on fire. We're not very good at tooting the horn. That's another statement that's come up on Federal Council recently. By achieving so calmly, so quietly, so professionally, rather than let the whole house fall apart and then coming in and saving it, do we lose that visibility of how effective we are? So should we have let Rome burn so that we could have come in and saved it, or how do we get better at telling non-members about that 7 out of 10 curry on St George's Terrace 9 months ago?
Look, I think the danger is you let Rome burn and it keeps burning and you can't get it back. So the national registration thing, there was a whole lot of things which are pointed out as being problems, and they're still problems. I think you just have to do what you think's most effective. At the end of the day, you want to be the most effective association that you can be, and if it means working behind the scenes to get the outcome and not getting the obvious credit, well, so be it. I think membership, what's the saying? Success has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. I mean, membership is a problem for all organisations. There's not one organisation where it's not compulsory that has fantastic membership. And I think that we beat ourselves about it. I think all you can do is be the best organisation you can be. You try to cultivate the younger generation to feel that you actually do reflect their values, or at least incorporate their values into what you have. And then I think you have to do it. You just have to see what happens. I don't think you can have a strategy to have a crisis. I mean, we had the medical indemnity crisis. That wasn't our making. The government made a fundamental error. We had been asking for what we call the long-term care scheme for years and years and years. Yeah, it was a long-term care scheme. Yeah, for years and years, and then now we've got the NDIS. Right, but the government didn't want that. They wanted to keep medical indemnity negligence decided in the courts and underpinned by commercial insurers. And then all of a sudden it became unaffordable and they had a crisis, and we were able to take advantage of that. But we can't make the crisis. All we can do is offer the solutions.
Sometimes it's about the environment that you find yourself in politically too. I mean, my health minister, Michael Wooldridge, was the gift that kept on giving. At one of our early meetings, he said that he was going to destroy me personally and grind the AMA into the dust, and that he had the means and the resources to do it. And so when I was asked by a journalist how the meeting went, I told them, and so that sort of set up this sort of we better have a look at this relationship here and what's the AMA actually saying, because we were trying to raise the issue of indemnity, and he was saying it's not my problem. You go and sort it out. You're the profession. You go and sort it out. And I said we can't do it without the government's help. Yeah. And at one stage, the gift that kept on giving said that the AMA was a militant trade union worse than the CFMEU. He told someone from the Australian, I got this phone call from the journalist from the Australian, what do you think of this comment about, the AMA being a militant trade union worse than the CFMEU? I said, have you spoken to the CFMEU? They might be offended. And then they actually quoted that, and then John Flannery wrote a headline for me for my first National Press Club speech, which was Musings of a Militant Trade Unionist. So sometimes you've got to play with it a little bit and work with the political landscape that you have. And if you have a health minister who is determined to butt heads, then you've got to butt heads back, and you've got to try playing nice, but if they won't let you play nice, then you've just got to do what you need to do. If you have somebody who's willing to sit down and negotiate with you, then that's the stance that you take.
And along those lines, I'll never forget in that medical indemnity thing, there was a crucial meeting and the minister was there and they had their solution. And they said, this is how it's going to be. And Karen just got up and started walking out the door. And before she got out the door, oh, no, come back. And so sometimes you do have to be very, very strong. And Bill, I think you did pretty much the same when you were the president, because I saw both of you sort of as But so you do have to do that, but you don't create it artificially. It was.
Bill, one of my regrets of the presidency was on budget night last year, AMA New South Wales put out a press release criticising our approach to the budget and criticising the budget. It wasn't a perfect deal. It was a long way from everything the AMA wanted. Has it always been ever thus? Have we always had state AMAs, issue by issue, being difficult?
Yes, I think given the structure of the AMA in terms of its federal structure and state makeup, that's always going to happen. I think we just got to handle that issue when it occurs. I think it's not unhealthy. Don't get me when the states criticise it. Obviously, the states have to represent their state, their issues, their membership. You may say that should reflect the whole of the country, but it doesn't necessarily do so. So as disappointing as it may be, when you think you put a lot of time and effort into developing a policy and developing a position with the government of the day, and often they don't understand what the work that went in behind the scenes, but in terms of their constituency, they often need to come out and make a comment that may contradict your sort of position, but I think you may argue that even with the health of our organisation in many respects. I mean, I see it happen in politics. If you talk out of line in politics, you get hammered. I think that's very unhealthy. I think people should be, as politicians, need to speak on behalf of their constituents and over whatever issue it may be. So to answer your question, I think we've just got to tolerate it and accept it, and just part of us as a family.
I think the key thing about that, though, is that division is death, and there's nothing that the bureaucrats love better is to have a whole divided group of doctors, because they can't actually get a decision so they can make their own. And so if we do have those disagreements, and yes, certainly had them in my time too, you need to pick up the phone and sort it out behind the scenes, because once it becomes an issue in the public space, it wrecks any chance of any rapprochement. And I think we have that with, not just within the AMA, but also with the other craft groups that we engage with. There's you said it, the colleges and societies group, for instance, was something that we put together around indemnity. Actually, is one of those things, but it carried on, which is great. It means that we're showing leadership as an AMA to bring the groups together under our wing, but also it means we're trying to iron out those divisions. And the best times we've had is when we've actually got a very cohesive group here at AMA, but also when we're dealing with issues that we've got everyone sings from the same hymn sheet. That's how we got indemnity and stuff through. And we were about to gather stuff through, but political things change.
I only just worked it out that writing a document the last couple of days, the next president will step down in 2020, and Rosanna, we know the only reason the 2020 summit was so hopeless because you weren't invited.
I was such a popular girl with Nicola Roxon and Kevin Rudd.
Can you reflect again?
Karen's
given some insights into her relationship with Michael Wooldridge. I've talked about my curry nights with Greg Hunt. What's it like when you? How do you engage when the relationship with the minister appears to have broken down?
So in my time, it was election time, literally, and there was good communication on both sides. Tony Abbott was Health Minister in the incumbent government at the time, and Nicola Roxon was Shadow, and policies were coming from both sides into the AMA. And I think the thing that burnt my relationship with Nicola Roxon at the beginning was the fact that she got me on the phone and she described all the preventative health agendas, that general practice was going to cure everyone was going to be jogging every morning for half an hour, there'd be no more obesity or excess alcohol consumption. We were not going to need any hospital beds, was the message, clearly, because in the short period of time that Labor was going to be in government, all our ails would be cured, which is a great aspirational thing. She was completely correct if we could achieve that. But reality is that's not the case. And I remember saying to Nicola, but what about beds, Nicola? And she got very angry with me. Stop talking about beds. The AMA just bangs on about beds all the time. It's not about the beds. You know, there's enough money in beds in Australia. We need to be doing other things. So we started there. It took quite a while to retrieve it. And I remember when they succeeded in government and our first meeting together, the minister at that particular point of time gave me a good scolding. She took me in and gave me a good scolding. I wonder if I'd been a man, whether she would have been able to do that. Certainly as a female president, she felt she was empowered to scold me for the way I'd behaved as a federal president of the AMA, representing the profession and the needs of our patients in the public hospitals. By the next 12 months or so, she was showing me her wedding photos, and certainly behind the scenes, the relationship was well and truly repaired, but politically, we still had to be at a standoff to a degree. There were things going forward, as there often is with the new government that's empowered, reforms that were probably not the best necessarily, we believe, for the patients, and certainly the national registration system, which then lent itself to the task substitution, the prescribing and the Medicare rebates to the others that you've described, Andrew, was something very challenging that we needed to put parameters around. So it was a little bit testy, but it was still a lot of fun.
All right, it's occurred to me that up on the stage here we have four of the six of you are GPs. Do we have a problem with GP membership, Steve?
Look, I think we do. It's being relevant to the federal AMA, of course, is where GP policy is prosecuted, and of course that's remote from the local membership at a local level. We are prosecuting very good arguments, and that's not driving the membership. Now, we talk about the sort of activities that my fellow presidents have put together. And, in Bill's, I was state president when Bill was federal president. And in the indemnity reforms, we saved every doctor in this country their AMA membership for the rest of their life. They're paying less than what we charge them in the savings we made in indemnity because the prices were going crazy for the rest of their life. And there's no excuse for no one, for any colleague not paying their membership. But that's all assumed. I mean, if you're not a member, we still prosecute reforms. And we used to say we've got, we represent all doctors, only 30% of them pay the bill. And I guess that's a bit of a risk, and we're not going to not represent all the doctors, but we do need to think about the value proposition for our GP colleagues and to engage them as best we can. And when you look at the membership issues we tried to bring the states together to say, well, how can we do this membership better? You analyse your own figures. The more touch points you have with a member, the more likely they are to pay the bill next year. It's the ones that don't have, we don't touch, they don't touch us. They're the ones that most at risk of being lost. And I think back, why did I join the AMA? Well, actually I joined the AMA the day I graduated because there was an AMA booth over there, there was the medical board booth over there, and you went to each one and you paid your dues, and I've been a member ever since. And I used to say to my colleagues, look, at certain parts in your career, you can be a representative, you can be the person who's the spokesperson, you can give your time, but at other parts of your career, we just want your cash. We'll use it responsibility and we'll prosecute the arguments for you. And similarly, when we move out of the leadership roles, we expect our colleagues to do the same. It is a difficult case to make in a very tight fiscal environment for our general practitioners to say this is worth you paying the bill for. And I don't really know the answer. I know that we say all membership organisations are losing, but we need to think about our special value proposition with our membership to make sure they're aware of the hundreds of things that you dealt with in a year that's made their life a bit better.
I think that crisis breeds membership, and you can't manufacture a crisis, but I think we have a few looming. And I joined the AMA, next year it'll be 40 years since I joined the AMA, and I was a medical student. and I've been a continuous member ever since. I just felt like I needed to have a professional organisation that represented my interests. I think one of the things that we do need to do is to be always mindful of our student and junior doctor representatives, our members, and look after their interests, because they will become GPs, and if we looked after them as students and as junior doctors, then they will stay on as members regardless of which specialty that they go into. I think that we do have a crisis looming in general practice. I think that the bulk billing rates are at a tipping point. The Medicare rebate freezes probably sent it into that sort of mode. There have been a couple of headlines about how little GPs are earning, about how earnings for GPs are starting to drop, and there's a point at which we can't provide quality of care for the Medicare rebate that's being provided, balancing against the costs of running a practice. So I think the viability of practice is something that we should be really focusing on in the future, and to also, I think we're also starting to see movements towards managed care, and the Bupa campaign that is being run is a case in point. But I think we have to guard against whether that's going to happen in any form in general practice as well. So I think highlighting those issues over the next couple of years will help to alert GPs to the need for a champion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've been a member since I moved from here, and Andrew Dearden still gets a cheque from me at the BMA. I'm still a member since I graduated, before I graduated. So it kind of gets you, and you just know that there's a benefit in belonging. I think what the AMA actually does is brings together all the craft groups. There's very great strength in that. You know, people say, you know, the opticians can put drops in, can't they? Well, yes, but they don't know about the other bits that go with that. And you know, why do you need a psychiatrist? A psychologist can do all those discussions we keep having. There's a very good reason that you do a medical degree. There's a very good reason why you do that. Coming to general practice specifically, of course, we all agree. I mean, my first conference here was in 1996, and it was about managed care. And I remember that I was absolutely petrified standing up at a microphone, coming in for the first time, saying, actually, we do have managed care in this country, and it's fantastic. It's managed by the GPs, and we manage our care very well. The problem is US-style managed care. Guess what? That mantra's not changed. But the trouble is that we are being put out there as GPs, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but nobody's prepared to match the rhetoric with action. And as Karen is saying, there is a crisis coming. You can't do it on the bulk billing rate. There's another crisis coming. NDIS is going to be there, and we're being asked to do all sorts of other things. What's our relationship with that? And general practice is saying enough. We absolutely want to do this work. We want to do more. The work we do is not the same as it used to be. People talk about coughs and colds. I wish I had a cough and cold. I mean, it's chronic, complex care management, and it's across the board. So the game has changed. The role of the general practitioner has changed. And in many ways, the way we deal with that also has to change in the way we support that push. You know, it's not fee-for-service on its own anymore. It's other ways of providing quality care. And some of the things we used to balk at, like PIP and other sorts of payments, might have some relevance when it means you're being rewarded for the quality rather than just on a click of fee-for-service. But fee-for-service is still vital.
Well, I hope you all agree that that was a worthwhile session. There is homework for you all now to work out how exactly we capture the wisdom and the experience of former presidents. It's something. It's a piece of work. That's your homework for tonight, delegates. Can you please join me in thanking Kerryn Phelps, Andrew Pesha, Rosanna Capolingua, Mukesh Haikwal, Bill Glasson, and Steve Hamilton. Thank you. We have to have a photo.